My name is Reece. I came to Heart Change because Jua and Regina actually spoke at my church that I was attending at the time. I was going to a church in Waltham, Massachusetts, and so he had spoken there about starting a church plant in the Boston area. And a few weeks later, I guess Marion and Tamika also came to the same church and spoke about this. And at the time, I wasn't really interested, and I just met them and really just knew of them as these people who are planting a church plant. But my roommate ended up getting involved with them a few months later when they actually came to Boston and started doing some work. And so then through that, I started getting just a little involved with them and doing some things. At first part-time, and then eventually I started doing things more on a full-time basis. And then through praying through things, I just realized that it really reflected the calling that God had on me at the time to go and become a part of Heart Change. It's been like to be like at Heart Change since the beginning. I have to think about what it was like when Heart Change first started. And what attracted me to Heart Change originally was simply the vision.
The vision of Heart Change, equipping people to develop a passionate heartbeat for Jesus Christ in order to impact the local and global community.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Amen.
We had a vision of impacting the community, and we also had a number of people who had really good character, and I was really attracted to those things and to making a difference in the community that we were, where we were at. And I really didn't know what that had looked like because the churches I had been involved with had never been involved in this sort of ministry before. And so at the beginning you have this vision, but the reality is that you have a small group of people who are actually involved and people who are involved at different commitment levels. And so it turns out that if you wanted to get this vision done, you really had to have all hands on deck. And that's one of the things that I learned very early on about Heart Change, was that if something needed to happen, that we needed to be willing to do it. And it was something where everyone had to step up to do those things. There wasn't other people to ask to come along and help very often, at least not on more than a limited role. And I think for me, that was a really growing process because I learned to interact with people who I did not normally interact with. And I also had to learn to do some ministries in ways that I hadn't done them before. The biggest change for me was actually being involved in the kids ministry, where I had never done anything with kids before really, and didn't like kids, didn't like being around them, and I found them really unpredictable, and just would feel fearful when I was stuck around a kid alone in an area because I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know how to be an adult in that situation. But Heart Change was a place where I really learned to do that sort of thing.
It was so exciting when Jordan was the first kid in Heart Change Fellowship come to know Christ, and as Jua walked her through, shared the word with her, and as she gave her heart to the Lord, she was recalling a lesson that she learned from Kelly and Chris when she was in Sunday school the day before.
I think another thing that has been true is Heart Change has been through a ton of transition. It seems to always have been going through transition in one way or another, whether it's people that have come and gone, or whether it's the location of the church, because we've now moved twice. And in each area, the type of ministry that we've ended up having or having to focus on has been significantly different than the ministry was at other areas. And the needs of the community in each area has been a little bit different than the other areas. So if we wanted to stay committed to the vision that Heart Change had, you had to be willing to stay with them and stay committed to that, and then transition the way that you did ministry and the way that you interacted with people. And so that was one of the things that's really been a big change through Heart Change's time. And I think the fifth thing that I think of is I think of God's provision in this time, because it was a time where there was no one else really to rely upon. And I saw a couple of different times specifically where I think of God's provision in major ways. I know for the Robinson family, when Josiah was born, it was something where their family was just in a point of crisis, and it was something they couldn't really handle in their own strength. And so they were brought to that place of brokenness. And seeing their family deal with that, and seeing the way that the church gathered around them during that time was something that was encouraging to me. And I know for myself, a year later, I had my eye injury, ended up having my eye surgery, and almost lost my eyesight in my left eye. and couldn't drive for 2 months while I was recovering from that. And that for me was a time also where I saw God's provision and saw people reach out to me. And those are things that I really think about with Heart Change.